I would like to start off the questions with just asking Timothy and Stephen to talk a little bit about the source inspiration, not so much the story at this stage that inspired it, but the desire to do something that combined the poetic with science fiction, which also, I think, in terms of what we've ended up seeing, has very strong elements of surrealism with the Gothic.
I think it was after we had done Institute Beniamenta that when we approached Channel 4 with the idea of possibly doing a second film, that they specifically said that we had to change the genre, the kind of subject matter that we were going to work with, that we had to shoot in color and be a lot more accessible with our less hermetic. And I think that between ourselves, we have had a great love for certain Latin American writers, and in particular, there was a story, The Invention of Morel, by Casares, Bioy Casares. And I think we wanted to approach science fiction, but not so much in terms of fantastic hardware, but in terms of a more poetic sensibility and with a certain element of magic realism. And that was it.
Now, the story about the ant who swallows the spores is for you considered the perfect metaphor for madness. And obviously the character of Dross in the film is the mad scientist, which deals with the science fiction element of it. I'd like to ask you about the metaphor for madness, but also in terms of the character of Dross, who was a real person and existed and was called Dross.
Droz, I mean, everybody in Switzerland should probably know who this man is. Jacques Droz, he was responsible for inventing, not specifically, but inventing these extraordinary automata. And I think for us it was a secret homage to this man's work that we developed this film. But also in terms of this insect story, there's a museum in Los Angeles, the Jurassic Museum, which we'd seen some 10 years ago. And it's a museum which I'm not sure whether anyone knows about it. It's a kind of, it's a false museum. It's a museum which everything inside, although it looks absolutely real and fabulous, it also, it's all fake. But there's enough.
Well, it's ambiguous.
But it's ambiguous. You go in feeling that you've seen something out of the ordinary, and at the same time, you're sort of nagged by the fact that this cannot possibly happen, which probably brings us back to this quote by Sallust, which opens up the film: "These things never happen, but are always." So.
I think that with the insect story, and particularly with this museum, that we like the idea of it's more or less that an allegory about madness, and that well, it sort of became the general. It sort of allowed us to establish the film as a parable or as a fable, and I think that's the way we wanted to get to take you into the film.
also, one of the things that struck me, just to take it on perhaps a more straightforward level, was the character of Adolfo. To talk a little bit about him in terms of the source material, but also the fact that he's a surprisingly gentle hero for these days, and that the same character plays both the piano teacher and Adolfo.
There are two characters. They're played by the same person, Cesar Saracu. There's Felisberto, who is the piano tuner. But of course, Malvina is in love with Adolfo. And what we wanted to create was this sort of overlap between the two characters. Although visually they look a little bit different, that there is we wanted to play on the idea of a very, very close resemblance that for Malvina, when she's contacted by Felisberto, that there's a certain frisson that she starts to come alive to his presence, and although Felisberto can't possibly know why, but it was an important element in that equation.
This is a question, obviously, that could go 1 second, just one thing to Amira first, that could be discussed by anyone, but I think that there's a very powerful sensual and erotic feel to the film, which largely comes from Amira's performance, but also is integral to the whole mood of the piece and ties in with the original idea of shooting it in Portugal and how Portugal is perceived as an inspiration rather than a literal location. And perhaps that's something that Amira can talk about, because she was such a key figure in creating that sense.
Thank you. For me, what I thought was very interesting about working with the Quays brothers was the fact that I think often actors want to be perceived as very strong emotional identities outside of the film. And I thought what was interesting was to be an absolute object and to be like an inanimated marionette. And I actually really like the idea of actors being like a blank canvas or like a marionette who you sort of allow yourself to be penetrated by the director's vision. And I loved the aspect, the silent movie aspect. I thought it was very interesting to put oneself kind of behind the character and, in a way, let the Quays animate that. And of course, the danger with those kind of roles is you've got to be alive. You've got to keep them alive. It can't be posing. I think it's a very physical role. She's lost her memory, so that I thought it was wonderful to come back to that sort of childlike quality that she has, to try and her brain's been literally scraped out, but something stayed there. And I thought it was a very strong film about identity and trying to find your own identity through the meanders of your own brain or your own thought through someone else's vision. And I thought that was very strong in the film. So I actually loved the idea of being an automata. And to let the Quays animate me through their music, through... I sort of think of the Quays as Cocteau in a way. I think Cocteau had wandering hand trouble. I think all his films are about with the hands, and I think the Quays have that. They're very physical directors. They're very implicated in the set, the way the set is built. They're very organic directors, and I think that's very interesting for an actor to deal with that aspect of the work. You know, to be a blank canvas again on which they can project their fantasy. And I thought the eroticism that you mentioned, I thought it was also very pure, because there's that whole childlike thing, and she's being manipulated by this kind of Mephistophelian character again. But I love the world that they brought me, and I love their music. I love the darkness, the sort of gothic-y. There's no precise reference with the Quays, and I think that's wonderful. But I also thought it was wonderful to play a silent something like a silent movie kind of character.
I'd like also, please, to apologize to Keith and Alexander for not introducing them at the beginning. They're the producers of the film, which of course is typical of me to forget to introduce them, so I'm sorry. And just to ask both of them to briefly not talk about anything as mundane as how the film came together, but just how they see it in terms of the content of the work that Timothy and Stephen are doing.
Yeah.
Just start. Sorry. Just start.
It's been 10 years in the making, this film. And 10 years since we were last in Locarno with the Quays brothers' first feature film. But it's more than 25 years that I've been working with the brothers. We first met in 1969 at Art College. So actually it's a rather unusual producer's relationship, because whilst one has a practical job to do, to raise finance and make sure a film is being made, one is also very close at all times to the visions of quite extraordinary filmmakers, unique, distinctive, imaginative filmmakers who are trying to make films in a way that others are not in this period. So, as a producer, it's a very exciting challenge, even if it takes 10 years to achieve.
Right. I think we're ready if anybody has some questions. I know there was somebody behind the bank of cameras. Can we ask? Okay. Non c'è il signore lì.
Allora, chiedo scusa, volevo chiedere semplicemente questo ai fratelli. Guardando il film ho trovato forte l'ispirazione a un balletto...
Yellow one.
The yellow one, yeah. The yellow one, yeah.
Okay. Adesso funziona?
Can I use this one?
Yes, absolutely.
Si sente? Bene. Allora, guardando il film mi è venuto in mente uno dei capolavori del balletto classico, cioè Coppelia di Leo Delibes, che ha lo stesso praticamente tema riguardante questo bellissimo automa che poi viene cercato. Volevo sapere se anche voi avevate pensato a questa idea. Prima domanda. Seconda domanda, non avete mai avuto paura di cadere in un eccessivo estetismo che coprisse in parte la storia che stavate raccontando? Bene.
I can't hear anything.
You haven't got anything. The second question I got, I think the first one, which was...
Yes, of course, I think everybody knows Hoffman's stories. I don't think that we went... it must be in the background, of course, but I don't think we had it in the foreground. I think we were very close to working up... I mean, the realm of puppets, automata, is something that historically we know something about, and it was something that we wanted to integrate into the fabric of the live action. In fact, it was very crucial that the animation should poetically kick in a way that, in a parallel analogic sense, that they were. If you took out a sequence, it would fall to pieces, so that it's very integral to the flow of the film. I don't think the second part of your question about, if I understand about it being too cosmetic, I think that the way that my brother and I like to work is that if we come from the realm of puppets and puppet animation, we create a world which is foremost a visual realm, to which we then bring sound and music, and music is very crucial for us. And if we were to just transpose that to, say, we all go see the ballet, and nobody at one moment ever says, why don't ballet, when they're doing their dance, why don't they talk? Why isn't there dialogue? Everything is told via gesture, by rhythm, by music, and decor is crucial. And in a sense, the silent cinema did that beautifully. And besides, there's quite a bit of dialogue in this film.
And also, when you think of whether ballet or opera, it's a totally aesthetic thing. It's very cosmetic. I mean, all the sets are built. It's in a theater. It's all theatrical. So it was also something we were very keen on transmitting. And I think all this film was shot in a studio. There's no decors out in nature.
So I think in that sense, it follows through the way we animate ourselves. We do everything in our studio in London. Only this time we got a much bigger studio in Leipzig. So we shot all the live action there. And then we came back and shot all the animation in London and then brought it together.
Any more questions here?
I have a really simple question. Just what kind
That's
of...
good.
Yeah. What kind of stock did you shoot it on? Because it looks quite unusual. Was it 35 or was it digital? And also, just a little slightly more complex question. Of course, it's live action and also stop motion animation, but what other techniques were you interested in exploring with this film to render it? Thank you very much.
I mean, the entire film was shot on high def, the live action. And for us, the animation was done on a Nikon digital camera. And we had to just, from a budgetary consideration, it was the high def route that we had to go. And we thought this was worth exploring. And in conjunction with Nick Nolan, the cameraman, he had never worked in high def. And we just said to ourselves, let's dive into the deep end.
But then the film eventually went back onto 35 millimeter. So. What was the second part?
Yeah, the second part.
Oh, did we... Yeah.
Oh, you noticed.
You shouldn't even know it.
I think, in principle, I think all the effects that I know, it's the luxury of being able to go into post-production and use a digital format and to lay in the sky and lay in the sea, which was something new for us. But in essence, for us, they're old silent film techniques. I mean, everything, you could have just matted them in. If we had used black, we could have done it. But I think I think we come to the digital world very slowly, and there wasn't a massive budget to go wild on. I mean, it was very, very controlled. So I think you couldn't be lavish. But the entire, we designed the whole thing as a model, and then it was scaled up in Leipzig.
Right. Jeff?
Yeah, I think one of the most extraordinary things about the film is the visual quality of it. And I'm particularly thinking about the color palette, which is quite remarkable. It's very muted, but also very rich. Were there any particular things you were trying to achieve? Did you turn to any painters or anything in terms of influence when you were thinking about the visuals?
But I know initially when the producers stipulated that we had to shoot in color, we said to each other, we're going to sabotage everyone, design everything in black and white, and just have a little bit of color in the costumes. And we almost got away with that. But what was the other question?
In terms of the visual realm, I think we were thinking, there's the famous painting by Beuchlin, The Isle of the Dead, which was sort of a crucial Derosian image that we wanted to achieve. But then I think that with Nick, we talked a lot about, there's a very beautiful painting by Magritte called The Empire of Light, where it's daytime above and nighttime below. And I think it was wanting to create a little bit of this in-between world between night and day. I think that, and I just think that we wanted to use the color very, designing all the decors basically very monochromatic, just so that the actors and the costumes just took on a certain end of the day quality of light. And it kind of suffused hot climate where a sort of hybrid, intense, like overly scented, perfumed night where only this kind of thing could happen.
I was just wondering who does what when you're working. Is there a division of labor, or do you collaborate on everything?
Well, when we animate, when we make our own decors, one of us starts on the right and the other starts on the left, and we meet in the middle. And we just try to continue that.
That's both literal and symbolic at the same time. No, I think that when you're the métier of animation actually teaches you all the métiers, because you have to learn to, we build everything, you design it, you build it, you animate it, you light it, you edit it, and it's part of the learning process, and it's why there's not one moment you're not conceiving every aspect of the film. And I don't think we're control freaks.
Definitely not.
Steve first, and then we'll go to the back.
There always seems to be, oh God, me as well.
I started this.
I just wanted to make you feel a bit more comfortable. Yeah, there always seems to be a funny story or an interesting story between how you get hold of the music, how you source the music to the film. Is there something? Can you tell us a little bit about how you worked, how you got hold of the stuff for this film?
Well, I think for almost since Street of Crocodiles, which is now 20 years ago, we started working with a Polish boy, Lech Jankowski. And we'd always get the music first. We'd just feed him a few ideas, basically said surprises, and the music would drift in, and we would, and it's like I think like any good choreographer, you listen to the music. You look and listen for rhythms, secret messages, secret scenarios, and you build it up that way. With this film, we'd also asked Lech to, he wrote 76 minutes of music, and then we had a terrible falling out, and we had to resort to library music, and we also brought in a young composer to help work things out. But in a strange way, it was disturbing for us, but at the same time, it's a chance encounter. You suddenly come upon other musics and they explode things for us in a different way. So in this one, we could have never asked Lech to write us a big love theme. It's not us. But with library music, it was suddenly there. And the musician that we worked with is it was something that he had written almost 50 years ago. It was on 78. And he said, oh, it was a ballet, boy meets girl sort of theme. And there were 4 themes, and we just used them. And that's how it worked.
This is for Amira Casar. I was wondering, the film is, well, it's very beautiful and mesmerizing, and you certainly helped in that. We've seen you very often in French films. Now, could you tell us what's the difference for you between working in France and in French films, and now with, you know, English speaking and partially also, I guess, in Germany?
Well, I'd always wanted to work in France. I went to drama school in England. I went to the Conservatoire, not in England, I'm saying in France, because I couldn't afford to go to RADA, because in France it's all government subsidized by the Ministry of Culture. So there was a huge language thing. I had to conquer the French language, and literally to get into the Conservatoire I had to master the language and not have a trace of an English accent. So I managed to do that, and then I just thought that France at that time, it was in the 90s, early 90s when I went to drama school, I thought that France was a land of cinema, and it was what I call a terre d'accueil, sort of like an orphanage that lets, you know, I think France has actually discovered Kiarostami, Angelopoulos, a lot of the Asian cinema. So I thought, wow, it would be an interesting place to start maybe a career, because I thought there were interesting directors there. But English being my first language and my love of the Quays, I'd seen the Quays work in France, thanks to Paris, and thanks to French distributors, I'd seen their work there. So I like to work in English. I've done some work at the Almeida, I've worked a bit in England, and I would like to repeat that, you know, that experience, because there's a different rapport with the language that's more elastic. It's with French, you have a sort of syntax that you have to follow. And with English, it's much more of a free and elastic language. So I mean, more physical. There are more consonants, and in that way, it's quite close to German. And what I loved about the Quays is that you can actually invent your own language. You know, you can. I have a huge love of Jacqueline Dupre, and I'd seen bits of documentary on Jacqueline Dupre, and I think she never spoke German in the beginning. She sort of invented it, and I love that fact that with the Quays, language is important, but you can almost make your own language up. Provenance isn't important. It doesn't matter where you come from, and direct references aren't important, although they really bring you into their work and into their world. And I think it's quite nice to let yourself be inspired, sort of sucked into it.
Actually, I didn't realize you have an English background. I thought you were French.
No, I do have an English background. I was born in England.
Oh, okay.
Brought up in England too. But then I went to France to drama school.
And would you like to continue more in France or in England or
no,
wherever?
No, both. I mean, I'd love to work in languages that I can't master. I'd love to work in Swedish, for instance, and Danish, and, you know, yeah. I've worked with Carlos Saura in Spanish. I played Buñuel's maid, so I had to learn Spanish for that. So, yeah. I'd love to, you know, it's the film that matters. It's the director and the vision. The language comes afterwards.
Thank you.
So, have we got any more questions? One here.
Solo una precisazione. Kiarostami, solo una precisazione. La Francia ha inventato il cinema, ci ha dato tanto, ma Kiarostami è stato scoperto qui a Locarno, e l'ho ricordato lui l'altra sera qui sul palco quando ha preso il Pardo d'Onore.
Oui, mais le réseau de distribution, pardonnez-moi, mais le réseau de distribution était français. Je veux dire que c'est en France qu'on a quand même découvert, peut-être c'est Locarno, mais c'est aussi quelque part un petit peu comme une terre française ici. Mais c'est quand même largement en France où il a été distribué et qu'il a eu une grande partie de ses films montrés, je veux dire avant l'Angleterre surtout.
Je ne voudrais pas vous sembler chauviniste, mais lui-même, il a dit merci à Locarno parce que ça a été le départ de ma carrière. C'est bon, c'est bon,
non,
madame.
Je ne veux pas le contredire, c'est juste par rapport à l'Angleterre qui souvent a du retard. Je trouve que les Anglais ont souvent du retard quant à la découverte et la distribution des films antérieurs, passés, présents d'un cinéaste. dans ce
Moi,
sens-là.
moi, je rappelle les mots de l'autre jour de M. Kiarostami en personne, qui a dit sans Locarno et sans le part d'argent pour.
C'est bien, vous
où
êtes
est la
nationaliste,
maison,
c'est bien.
Ouais. On doit se souvenir que Locarno a découvert plusieurs grands acteurs, grands réalisateurs.
Mais c'est un festival important. On est content d'être là,
Moi, bon.
je crois.
Hello. Very nice that you come back to Locarno. But it's too long. You should come earlier. I don't know if this is a question or this is, but maybe you can help me. Like all the time when I was looking into this movie, it came to me, it flashed to me. Is this a whole palette of alchemy, alchemical, psychopathological, of RNA in emotions in a surrealist kick?
Yes. Yes. Can we quote you? We'll put that on the poster.
That's a good one.
Right, then we've got one question at the back, and then I think that we can wind up. Another question.
He's going to have another go.
No, è solo una domanda. Il film è già uscito nel paese d'origine, quando sarà distribuito? E sì, queste cose del tutto normali, che distribuzione avrà?
In the UK, the film will be released by Artificial Eye, one of the major art house distributors in the UK. Artificial Eye. It is true that we're very slow releasing our films in the United Kingdom. I imagine that it will actually appear in theatres in February, March next year.
Right. Okay. Just question here.
Una domanda che vale sia per i registi che per il produttore. Come si fa a lavorare per 10 anni su un progetto senza rischiare di perderne il pathos, la necessità, che è una molla fondamentale, credo un propulsore fondamentale per qualsiasi progetto? 10 anni sono un tempo molto lungo, no?
I guess it's a little bit like writers or composers who write something and then they put it in the drawer and just put it away. It happened after it was when we wrote the script almost immediately, within a year and a half, it was instantly rejected. And then we just filed it away. And then over the years, we work on it here and there. Then I think it was around, 1908, Terry Gilliam came on board. Of course, doors opened. It's amazing.
Yes, the film had as the brothers said, it was the first draft, second, third draft of the script were written quite quickly. We then went into Never Never Land, and the film stayed in a drawer for a while. Terry Gilliam is a great admirer of the work of the brothers. And I was sitting in the bath one day saying, are we ever going to get this film made? And someone had said to me, Keith, what you need is an executive producer. And I thought, well, perhaps I should go and ask Terry. He said, yeah, let's get it made. Of course, it was not as easy as that. But once he put his support behind the film, it made access to a range of potential financiers far easier. And he wrote a very beautiful text about the horrors of the current state of cinema and why he thought the brothers were the sort of unpatronizing, imaginative cinema that we needed now. And it was this real passion from him that enabled us to begin to build a very fragile construction site to get the film made.
If we have as our last question here.
Speaking of the importance of visuals and the imagery in your film, how do you feel about Peter Greenaway? Because he uses, to him, it's very important.
Well, we used to see him around when he used to live in England, when he was at the BFI, but I mean, he's sort of gone away.
Where is he? No, but I mean his work. What do you, did that in any way influence you, what he's done?
No.
No.
None whatsoever.
Not at all.
No, it's just interesting that the careers of Peter Greenaway and the brothers have certain time parallels in that both started with their first short films funded by the British Film Institute Production Board at about the same period of time, which actually showed there was a body of British filmmakers who wanted to make films in where the emphasis was of the visualization of the film was very important. There's no other connection other than at a certain point in history, these things happened. The same with Derek Jarman, Sally Potter, all really converged at the same point in time at the beginnings of their career.
I don't think we meant any disrespect towards Peter when we said nothing. I mean, you admire his work, and we've met and talked with him, and a joy to talk with, but it never went any further. He never invited us out for spaghetti or anything.
Thank you.